A really common question I get is, should I use automated webinars or live webinars in 2022 to sell courses or to sell high ticket? So we're going to dive into that answer, but before we do, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit that like button so this video gets some love and we can keep getting some more views on this channel. So guys, at Linx Digital, we've run ads to both live webinars and evergreen webinars. We've spent over $1 million in different niches, often selling courses. So we've been able to see from both sides what the pros and cons of live versus automated webinars are. Now let's dive into why you should consider doing a live webinar, right? Let's cover that first. So one of the biggest benefits of a live webinar is the high amounts of engagement. People are much more likely to show up, ask questions, and you're often going to be able to deal with their objections on the fly on the actual webinar. Your close rate is going to be a lot higher because of that engagement and the fact that people are really interacting back and forth. You'll also be able to get valuable customer feedback really quickly. This is such a massive win because when you're able to actually talk to your customers and you have, let's say 50 of them on the call and they're just asking the same questions over and over, you know that the next webinar, you need to address that objection in the actual slides itself. So this really allows you to iterate very quickly and get good at doing live webinars and basically being able to sell whatever it is you're selling much more effectively because each webinar gives you new learning experiences. Now, obviously, if you just have a VSL or an automated webinar, you're not getting that feedback every single week. And also you get to get really good at delivery and presentation. So if you're doing a live webinar, you're usually going to be doing them at least once a week, right? And what this means is that your delivery and your ability on camera to really communicate and persuade people is just going to improve. It's going to become more and more natural sounding and you're going to get much better at building trust with your audience. This means that if you, let's say, do 8 webinars over a space of 2 months, you're going to get really good at delivering your content and at dealing with people's objections, and your webinar close rate is probably going to double from, let's say, your first webinar that you do. And what that means is when you do finally switch over to an automated webinar, you're just going to do so much better with your automated webinar because you're literally taking your best live webinar and putting that as your automated webinar. Now, what are the cons of doing this live webinar model? The first major issue is that it takes a lot of time. Every single week, you have to spend at least a few hours doing the webinar, and it does become time consuming. Also, if you're doing this every single week, you might start getting a little bit bored after, let's say, a couple months because you're just doing the same content over and over. And, you know, as human beings often don't like doing the same thing over and over. So that's something to keep in mind where after a couple months, you may actually want to switch it up and try a different format just so you personally don't start losing your mind, right? For me personally, if I make the same video over and over, I start really getting annoyed. Now, another drawback to doing the live webinar model is the fact that when you're pausing and unpausing ads, it can negatively affect campaign performance. So usually if you're doing a live webinar once a week, what's going to happen is you're only going to run ads, let's say the 4 or 5 days before the webinar. So if you're running it 5 to 7 days, the people who sign up 5 to 7 days often won't show up because it's so far away, right? Like usually people will show up if it's something that's a few days away or the next day, but 5 days away, it's going to be very, very difficult. Because of that, you'll often pause your ads right before your live webinar and you'll often unpause them, let's say two days after, right? So then you have 5 days before the next one. And what this does is this can affect the algorithm. So in both cases, it kind of sucks because on one hand, let's say if you actually keep your ads running 7 days a week, you'll have better ad performance, but then those people who are signing up 4 to 7 days before often are going to have a much lower show rate. So that's something to keep in mind with live webinars. If you can do them twice a week, that's ideal because then you can just keep it running evergreen the whole time. You just change out the dates every 3 days. So that's something that can work as well. Now let's talk about the automated webinar model and the pros and cons of that. So the first pro of the automated webinar model is that it works 24/7 for you. You don't have to show up anywhere. It doesn't depend on time zones. Whatever time your viewer is in, they can go watch the next automated webinar, which is usually a just-in-time webinar. So it can be in like 10 minutes for them or 5 minutes. And you can go on vacation, you can do whatever you want, and you're still selling. So that's the ultimate power of having an automated webinar. It really allows you to scale and it just allows you to sell automatically. A big pro of an automated webinar is you do get higher show up rates just because of the fact that people have the just-in-time option. So you're actually getting a lot more leads to actually show up to the webinar because they'll sign up and there'll be an option for a just-in-time so they can literally join in like 5 minutes and only have to wait 5 minutes to watch the webinar. Now, what are the cons of an automated webinar? So you have to understand that because of the fact that it's not live, yeah, you can pretend it's live, but really people can tell. The webinar needs to be a lot better for it to convert, right? Usually if you have that live interaction and the back and forth, your conversion rate goes up by 50% to 2x just because of the fact that you're actually able to address objections that people are having on the actual webinar itself. So you're able to personalize it a bit to different attendees and the questions they have. And a lot of those people who are asking questions are thinking about buying. You can't do that on an automated webinar unless you have some sort of chat support that can potentially do it. But then having 24-hour chat support's obviously going to cost you money. You're not going to do that unless you're actually scaling. So because of that, you will definitely see a decrease in conversion rate. And that's why you need to have a really well-scripted automated webinar. Really, the best route is to perfect your live webinar, do it 3-4 times at least, maybe 8 to 20 times. And then when you have that really great live webinar, then record your best live webinar where you had the highest conversion rate and run that as your automated webinar. One of the drawbacks of automated webinars in 2022 is that people are getting kind of tired of them, especially in the internet marketing niche. People have been to so many automated webinars. Really, they prefer having a more live experience. So some sort of live workshop or some sort of experience where they actually get some interaction with you, ask you questions. People are expecting more value upfront these days as well. So just taking them to an automated webinar with a standard script is not as effective as it used to be. Now, it can still be very effective if you have the right copywriting and if you're way better at writing webinars than most people are. However, for the average Joe out there, I do think live webinars are better to start out with, right? So my suggestion in 2022 is if you are an experienced webinar copywriter, let's say you've generated $500,000 to $1 million plus with automated webinars or live webinars, yes, go with the automated webinar model because you have the experience to make it work. However, if you're just starting out, go with live workshops. Go and try buying traffic on YouTube to your live workshop and make sure you have your email follow-ups, your SMS follow-ups, so you can get a bunch of people onto the live workshop and have that interaction. And that's going to actually result in people buying a lot more of your program. So that's what I suggest you do if you're looking to actually run webinars. If you're experienced, go with automated webinars. If you're newer or if you are unsure about your offer, if you're still testing it out, go with a live workshop because you're going to get so much more feedback. And then once you do 10 or 12 of those live webinars, you can turn that into an automated webinar. It will work well, but don't try to shortcut it. Usually most of the really great webinar copywriters out there started by doing live webinars because it allowed them to get feedback every single time they did a webinar and see what the conversion rates are like. And with that iteration, they just got better and better. So guys, that wraps it up for today's video. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the like button. I really appreciate it, guys. I'll see you in the next video.